From the motivation of Sunday's manipulative practices to a hidden plotline between Firefly and Gallagher, these are 10 things you should know about Penacony. Like and subscribe if you enjoy the video, and without wasting any more of your time, let's get into it. Number 1. Mishas' true identity. At the time of me recording this video, we actually don't know if Misha is a real character who exists in the world or not, because during the very limited interactions in the game that involve Misha, almost nobody can see him, or at very least, nobody acknowledges that they can. There are currently 2 interactions in the game that directly involve him. One of them are a scuffle with Acheron, and the other is a friendly conversation interrupted by March 7th. Starting with the latter example, March 7th, a notoriously bubbly and friendly girl didn't directly address Misha was standing next to you, instead turning her attention directly towards the Trailblazer and asking them what they were doing. Then, going into the Acheron interaction, the closest thing we get to anybody acknowledging Misha's presence is when one of the Mafia bosses say, "Get 'em, boys."
Punish him, boss.
How did it come to this?
Now, while some people may try and point to this interaction as definitive proof Misha can be seen, it is worth noting that the phrase is just generic Mafia slang and doesn't necessarily dictate a character being one gender or the other. With all of that being said, until the day comes when Misha actually gets acknowledged by somebody of the opposite sex, it's gonna be really difficult to tell if he's a real character in the world or not. Number 2. Firefly's hidden plotline. This entire section is so robust and multifaceted that it's probably worth its own video, so for now I'll just give you the cliff notes until I can finish writing that script. For pretty much the entirety of version 2.0, Firefly and Gallagher were engaged in what I can only describe as some Death Note type competition with one another. Firefly was busy trying to manipulate the situation in order to achieve what she wanted, meanwhile Gallagher was trying to outsmart Firefly in order to get her alone and get what he wanted. It's a really interesting situation that entirely recontextualizes the early game in version 2.0. But as I said, I can't go into great detail because it's simply too complex for a 10-minute video, but don't worry, that will be the next one. Number 3. Sunday the Control Freak. A lot of the more keen-eyed players have likely noticed Sunday seems a bit controlling over all the happenings in Penacony. And while some players may try and dismiss this as him just trying to please the Dream Masters, it's actually more nuanced than that. Sheepe the Harmony is the Aon that Sunday falls under, and this is an Aon that tries her best to bestow peace and happiness across the entirety of the universe. But what's worth mentioning is that prior to the events of version 2.0, Enter the Order was assimilated by Sheepe the Harmony. Assimilation in StarRail is a concept that exists for Aeons, and it happens when 2 Aeons have a relatively similar path and collide with one another. Should this ever happen, the Aeon that cast a broader net underneath social hierarchy will end up assimilating the smaller one, thus giving it the powers of both. But this isn't necessarily a simple process, and it doesn't leave the one who wins out unscathed. Much like a goth in middle school, a change in mindset is destined to occur, and in regards to Sheepe, it meant going from the one who spreads happiness to the one who enforces it over the universe, which would in turn explain why Sunday was able to command over Avengerine without deviating from the path of harmony. Yeah, sure, he might be a control freak, but he's definitely a loyal one. Number 4. The IPC's interest in Penacony. Seeing as the IPC was perfectly content with using Avengerine like a disposable chip, you may be wondering what they see in Penacony as a planet. Penacony itself isn't necessarily the dream world that you see, it's merely a fictitious creation that people are allowed access to through Penacony specifically. And while sure, it's not as easy as just transporting technology in order to establish a new one, it is something that could very easily be done, especially by an organization as powerful as the IPC, which just begs the question why they have such an inherent interest in it. And that's because back in the day, Penacony used to be a prison planet controlled by the IPC specifically, and there were a whole bunch of different people from a whole bunch of different factions held up there, with captives ranging from the Masked Fools all the way down to the Self-Annihilators. There were some very powerful people kept in those holding cells. And since Penacony was built on the back of all their dreams, it's very likely that the IPC sees some sort of inherent value in that. As for what it is specifically, we don't exactly know. Number 5. Black Swan's phone call. During the 2.0 questline, Black Swan got a phone call from 2 unnamed individuals. Of these 2 unnamed callers, one of them was Boottail, who effectively said, "I'm going to kill you, now go get me a drink, woman."
My bullets will find you. Go buy a bottle of Asdona's White Oak.
Meanwhile, the first and more feminine of the 2 callers was none other than the Dahlia. Real name? Constance. Constance is a member of the Annihilation Gang, and the significance of her specifically speaking to Black Swan is that those 2 were initially going to square off against each other. During Duke Infernum's trailer, it was revealed that every member of the Annihilation Gang was going to square off against somebody on Penacony. The Shacklebound was going to take on Avengerine, the Constance was going to take on Black Swan, Aon, the tuner had Robin, and the scribe had Sparkle. However, at the time of me recording this video, Duke Infernum is dead, Robin and Avenger Reign are just assumed dead, Sparkle is basically impossible to find, and Black Swan is the last man standing Fortnite style. Now, I personally don't believe any character I just listed is actually dead. In fact, I think they're all just fine. But at the time of me recording this video, that's just speculation, and it's gonna be very hard for Duke to live out his original vision. Number 6, the truth of simulated universe. Up until version 2.0, it was entirely based on speculation if the events that happened in simulated universe were actually real. However, with the addition of none other than best boy Edward, we have come to learn that the events that transpired during Herta's dialogue are actually real events that happen in the universe. During the game's prelude, it is mandated that you encounter Aha as a part of the simulated universe tutorial, and after finding him, you unlock the first of many potential Aon logs that you can read up on. Within this specific one though, it details a time that Aha once set the entirety of the Trailblaze Express ablaze in a fiery explosion. Through a conversation between none other than Akavili the Trailblaze and Pom Pom the conductor who can just never leave, it's revealed that not only did that happen, but Aha has the ability to shrink down into a human-sized version of himself, which is a trait that we now have full confirmation that both he and Akavili can do. Number 7, the Aon of Avenger Reign. During the 2.1 questline, it is heavily implied that Avenger Reign and the rest of the Sigonians follow a different Aon from the practical bunch. There are 18 confirmed Aons in Honkai StarRail, and all of them have different sorts of religion and ideological prospects that follow in their wake. But with the 2.1 storyline, it is revealed that not all cultures and worlds actually align with an existing Aon, and some of them even manage to believe in a completely different god altogether. And the Sigonians were such a race. But there are no documented Aons in the world that have the unique ability to bestow such an extreme amount of luck onto an individual, which very likely means that either A, Avenger Reign's Aon is in fact a real thing in the world that we have yet to see, or B, Avenger Reign is that Aon. And while that may initially sound a little far-fetched, it's important to realize that Nanook the Destruction, Tazaroth the Propagation, and Aha the Elation are explicitly stated to have been human at one point. Number 8, Sampo's inclusion on Penacony. A lot of people keep asking me where the Sampo video is. Don't worry, I'm working on it, but with the addition of version 2.0 and Sampo showing up, I want to wait until everything is concluded before I say anything on the matter, just in case he shows up again. As for why I think that, it's important to know that Sampo at no point was ever threatened by security when he was on Penacony. This is to imply that Sampo was actually invited and therefore has plausible cause to be there. But what I actually want to take note of here is that Sampo initially didn't intend on showing up in Penacony. Based on a dialogue interaction we see between Sampo and Giovanni post Ethereum Wars, Sampo explicitly states he's not going to Penacony just because he knows Sparkle is there. However, as we know, Sparkle ended up roping him along just so she can get him to play Puppet for a wider game with Black Swan, which actually leads me into number 9, Sparkle's powers and purpose. Aside from Misha, Sparkle is the most ambiguous character in the entirety of Penacony. To this day, we actually don't know much about her powers or anything about her motives. While it is very likely her only reason for showing up on Penacony is to invoke chaos, the more ambiguous of the two is the functionality of her power. During the marketing of Sparkle and Acheron, it is heavily implied that Sparkle has the ability to make duplicate versions of herself, which she can then in turn into different figments of other people's imagination. But on the opposite end of the spectrum, she was still willing to enlist Sampo's help in the form of a favor so that he could get his mask back, which can imply many things. Either she can't make more than one clone of herself at a time, or B, she can and she just can't talk through two at a time. Whatever the case may be, at least as of now, we don't exactly know how she's doing things. Number 10, Sparkle's games. Sparkle is, and always will be, taking the form of somebody else, and as a result, you will have to constantly be on your toes. What you may not know though is that the original Sampo we saw on Penacony wasn't Sampo, it was Sparkle. Upon completing the Black Swan text message, shortly before you get a message from the Memo Keeper herself, you will get a message from an unlisted number. If you pick the correct dialogue options, it is revealed to you that the person behind it is Sparkle. Then, if you proceed to pick the proper number thereafter, she will fully reveal to you that the Sampo you saw in the dream world and the Sampo that was your tour guide earlier was merely her in disguise. Which means A, she deceived you, but also B, she dreams of being just like Sampo, which don't we all? And that is 10 things you probably didn't know about Penacony. If you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe, and until then, I'm out.